Welcome to the 10th broadcast of State of the Arts. I'm Lisa Moore. This show explores the humanities and social sciences at Memorial. We chat with a variety of faculty members about their work and lives and how the issues addressed in their teaching and writing are critical to our understanding of the changing world. Today, I am very pleased to introduce our two guests, Nancy Dahn and Timothy Steeves, also known as Duo Concertante. Critics have said their playing is full of grace and fire, fury and repose, a triumphant mass of nonstop energy, just simply splendid, and a miracle of knowledge and poetry. And now we're going to hear why the critics have said that. Nancy and Tim will now perform a piece for us by Johann Sebastian Bach. amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a total thrill.
Oh,
I mean,
thanks.
it's so exciting to have had that happen and to be to have it live. It's really fantastic.
Thanks.
So I'm going to start. There's a million trillion questions I could ask you guys, but I'll start by asking you how you came together as Duo Concertante and how you came together because you're partners.
That's right. Yeah, we're partners in music and in life and as parents too. I was actually on Tim's search committee when he applied for the position, a piano position, long ago in 1996.
Here at Memorial.
Here at Memorial, yeah. So I first heard his magical playing when he did his audition recital, and I was really moved at that point. And then once he got the job, I asked him would he be interested in doing a recital together.
You actually phoned me when I got back to Germany and asked me. So I knew before even I moved here that we were going to be playing together.
Beautiful. And so, like, how does that work in your house? I can imagine a house that's just full of music all the time. Am I right?
Yeah, there's lots of music going on at the same time. So Tim's down in the nice music room that's soundproofed, and I'm up in our bedroom where there is a nice mirror I can use to practice with, and we're practicing, doing our separate things and trying not to interfere with each other too much. But then, yeah, we rehearse there too, and yeah, there's a lot of music for sure.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about Johann Sebastian Bach. So, Nancy, I've heard you say that when you're practicing something fast, you have to get the music in your fingers. And what does that mean?
It means a lot of things. I mean, yeah, there's a certain amount of sort of repetition of a complex motor motion that you have to do for it to feel somewhat natural and fluid. And in the case of Bach, I mean, he was just a genius on so many levels and wrote music that has really complex kind of combinations of finger spacings. I don't know how else to say it, but you actually learn so much just by playing his music. Your technique advances in addition to him just being so incredibly wonderful and profound. But, it's kind of neat all these years later that you feel like you're learning from someone 400 years, and that he's teaching you and talking to you through his music about how to play the violin. And it's the same thing.
No, he was a great teacher. I mean, I think we think of Bach as being a great composer and a player, but he was a phenomenal teacher. In fact, in the area of Germany, I don't know if he taught violin too much, but he was certainly a keyboard pedagogue. And in the area of Germany where he lived, in Thuringia, around Erfurt, so at the height of his career, 70% of all the organists working in that area were students of his. Like, he had a profound impact that way. And a lot of the pieces that he wrote were really teaching pieces. He wrote them to pass on his technique.
So when you're playing, do you feel the same thing, that it's in your fingers? And does that mean that you're sort of like overleaping thought and it's becoming physical?
That's the issue. When you play, you can work, you can be really aware of moving your I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's so much when you play you're not aware of. Like, there's so much muscle control that you really are not aware of that's just happening inside of you. It can be in very strange places, like in your abdomen or your back, and you're just not, that's impossible to practice. And so it's funny when, that Bach we've been playing for, 10 years or something like this, and so you practice it and you perform it a couple times, and then you put it to rest, and then you come back to play it maybe a couple months later, and sure, you can move your fingers and it sounds right, it just doesn't feel the same way, and it takes time for all of this other stuff to kick in, all of the support mechanisms that you need when you perform.
Yeah, and when you perform, there's always something coming at you from left field that you never anticipated, a thought that might sort of derail you for a moment, or all these things that are super easy when you're in your practice room or, just rehearsing. There's, suddenly there's just strange things that can happen to you when you perform.
Yes, so I mean, all of that sounds very complicated and way the heck out of control in your fingers. Yeah. But and this is a kind of intimate question, I guess, but are you able to listen to each other while you're playing? Like, how does that work?
Oh, of
yeah.
course.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like the saving grace in a lot of ways when you're performing, is that you're having a spontaneous dialogue right there, and so you have to kind of just engage in the moment. So yeah, listening is like a lifeline. I mean, it is wonderful to be listening too, but it actually saves you in a lot of cases if you're overly self-conscious or nervous or whatever. Yeah, but for sure, yeah, I mean, that's our job, is to be listening. Musicians, there's no other thing. I mean, you can't be a musician without being listening all the time. Your humongous ears.
So let me ask you about how you both came to be musicians. Like, I know, Nancy, you've written very movingly about your mom.
Mm-hmm.
How was she an influence for you?
Well, she loved music. She loved particularly classical music, and there was music playing in our home all the time. We always had CBC radio going. When I was 2, a friend was going to throw out a violin, and she said, "No, I want that violin. My daughter might play it." That's kind of an embarrassing thing to think, that your mother had so much, control over your destiny. But yeah, and so I grew up in kind of a rural, well, very much a rural part of Nova Scotia, and there was very little music in the schools. And she started me on some lessons, and I took a group class, started finally having private lessons in Halifax, so she would have to drive me, for hours to get to a good teacher and all of that. So, she really believed in the power of music, and I loved music. I mean, I don't know if I would have been a violinist per se if it hadn't been for her, but I certainly would have been a musician of some sort, because music just lights my inside up, and it always has from a kid. So.
Well, you wrote that in your mother's ideal day, she would play the cello for 2 hours.
Yeah.
So it was really there in your life in a big way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she got an enormous amount of pleasure out of music, just as an amateur and yeah, as a listener of music, for sure. Yeah.
And what about you, Tim?
Yeah, I started really early. I think I used to go with my sister when she had piano lessons. That's how I sort of was introduced to piano. I was really young. I was only about 3 or so. And then I remember at the end of my sister's lessons, the teacher would spend some time with me. And it sort of went from there. And it was always a big part of my life. But I wasn't really sure. Even after I graduated from high school, I wasn't really sure I was going to go into music. And I spent a year overseas in Germany before I started my degree at Western, and I think that's when it kind of gelled for me.
And what was it about Germany that did that?
They heard me play, and they made arrangements for me to audition as a guest student in one of the big academies there in Cologne, and I found that really fantastic. And just the I don't know, just being in the space where this music was created had a profound effect. Like visiting composers' homes, and it just somehow made it more personal. I think for me, like the music, like classical music as a kid, was very personal. Somehow I really related to it, and being in Germany for that 1 year made it really made it sink in, and that's what I wanted to do.
I'm not sure that everybody comes to classical music that way as a personal thing. So how was it personal, or why?
I don't know. I don't know. I loved reading about composers' lives. In fact, one of the things on my list, like, I never thought that I'd actually be a performer. If you would have asked me when I was in high school what I wanted to do, I might have said I wanted to be a composer, but never a performer. But that's a good question. I don't know why that was.
But it was like speaking to you clearly.
Yeah, it really did. Yeah. And even today, when I go, let's say when we're in Germany and we're in Bonn, which was Beethoven's birthplace, we had that experience with our kids. Actually, it was really cool. We were one of our early tours of Europe. We had our kids with us, and we used to listen to Beethoven Lives Upstairs all the time. And we had it going in the car, and we were just around Cologne, and we were listening to this, and the kids loved it. Like our daughter especially just loved that. And so we drove right to Bonn, and while the city was going, and we got out, and we went right up into Beethoven's birth house. I think it was a really well, it was a kind of a special moment for me to be able to show my kids this, and I think it was a special moment for our daughter too.
I'm sure.
You know, to make it so real all of a sudden.
Yeah, the actual physical presence.
Yeah.
What about, I wanted to ask you both about the idea of practicing, like practice. What does that mean? And does it have, you know, does it have spiritual connotations? Is it metaphorical? Is it, like, does it permeate to all aspects of your life? Or is it just plain, get in there and do the work until it's perfect?
Oh, it's definitely a time for me to, it's almost meditative, I guess. I mean, my day doesn't feel right unless I've practiced or just played the violin or just sort of discovered things through the violin, played music, but it's also, I mean, yeah, it's such a complete experience in terms of physical and spiritual and emotional, being aware of how your body's moving, being aware of what feelings you're channeling, and I mean, it's a gift to be able to experience that every day. So my favorite time to be practicing is when there isn't like a concert the next day or the next week, when it can just be like really unstructured and sort of discovering. And yeah, for sure there's a spiritual element. And I mean, people make fun of me, but I love to practice. I mean, I even try to sneak away and practice on Christmas Day and weird things like that because I just enjoy it. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. What about you, Tim?
Yeah, I find myself in a position, I don't want to be caught, but I mean, the pianist has a lot more notes, kind of thing, and so I always. Well, that's the truth.
Well, yes,
no. But my point is that.
Wait, isn't there a joke about that in the Beethoven movie?
Yeah, too many notes.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Tim.
No, so I often find myself like, oh, I got to practice to get the job done, like you were saying. You know, so practice can be many different things. It's lovely just to be able to practice for the sake of practicing, and that's a lot of fun. And especially when we're reviewing pieces that we've played a lot, and you come back to them and you can take your time with them and make new discoveries with them. But a lot of the time it's just learn the notes and get the stuff ready, because you know the performance is just down there. And that's not necessarily that much fun, and it can be actually quite stressful. But yeah, that's just the way it is. You know?
So I want to ask you about the difference between performing and practicing then, which you're getting to. Like what, I imagine, okay, for me as a writer, when the work meets the audience, it is, well, absolutely terrifying, but also a completion. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that way, or?
No.
No.
Because, well, I mean, usually a performance is one of many performances.
Yeah, it could be the beginning.
And in fact, trying to think of a performance as an end is actually a really dangerous thought, because it puts so much pressure on that performance to be perfect. So much more helpful for us is to just sort of feel like the next performance is just, you know, hoping for something even more wonderful than the last dress rehearsal maybe, or whatever, but that, you know, it's just a blip on the radar of a sequence of performances, and that, you know, you're just always trying to develop and, you know, become more convincing and all of that. But thinking of it as an end, like, as, you know, that it's finished,
right,
is actually really detrimental, I think, to performers and to nerves. Like it makes.
Can I take it right back?
No, but I mean, it is totally different.
And when we're on tour, like the first performance is always the scariest. And once that's done, then everything's fine. But there's just something about, you do all the practice, you get ready, and you just have to get through the first time. Even if you've played the piece 20 years, still that
not
first.
just get through.
No. But I don't mean get through. But you're
there's
really
more pressure on that first time.
You're really worried about the first one, because you just don't know how you're going to feel.
Yeah.
You know, even though just anything can happen. And then once that's done, you kind of have a sense of, I guess you kind of have a sense, like what I said before, you kind of you have a sense of really how well you know it, like how well you've internalized everything. Because there's so much you just can't control. But once that first performance is done, then you have a better sense, and then everything is okay.
But isn't it that lack of control, that element of, surprise, that is the thrill of doing this?
For sure.
Oh, for sure. And the fact that anything can happen is incredibly thrilling for both sides, both the audience sides and the performer side. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, embracing that is pretty important. It is pretty exciting. Yeah.
So you guys have commissioned a lot of works. How many works have you commissioned?
It's actually over 35 now.
Yeah.
Amazing. Over how many years?
20.
22, 21.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what does that mean, commissioning a work?
Well, you find a composer whose work you like, and then you have to find the funds. So you look for granting agencies, and then you ask him to write you a piece.
Or her.
Or her. Sorry. Yes. Or her.
Yeah. And so is that all? Is that all? Write me a
No.
piece, or yes?
No, you need to have performances lined up, and you need to get funding, and having performances for the piece so it has a life is really, really important. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you need to kind of have a vision for how it's going to be disseminated and all of that stuff.
But full disclosure, I have worked with you guys, and you came with an idea. So you have it's not just write me a piece,
Yeah.
right? Like you guys have a concept usually. Do you all the
yeah,
time, or sometimes? Or?
Sometimes we have a
Sometimes.
concept, yeah.
Like sometimes we'll partner. So sometimes we're doing, let's say, a whole bunch of Beethoven, a whole bunch of Schubert, and we'll ask the composer, this is the repertoire we're doing, and we want a partner piece for that. So write us something that's, I guess, inspired by this other music or something like that. But
Right.
sometimes it's just write us a piece. Like it's just open book.
Okay.
We'll take whatever you're willing to give us. Yeah.
And then when that happens, like, how much do you bring to that piece? How does that, like, what is that alchemy? Like, what's going on between the composer and the musician? And, like, are there people where you've just thrown up your hands and said, oh, we can't play this? Or I mean, I don't want you to name the people, of course. Or, is there sometimes, like, just this where you know what they want from you and they know what's it like?
Well, ideally, there's a bit of discussion. I mean, if there are places that are really unplayable or that you don't understand, or that you talk to the composer, and most times they're very willing to make changes. Sometimes they have really great ideas, but what they've written doesn't lie well on the instrument, and you can offer suggestions and say this gesture works just as well if I do this. Would it be okay if we change it? And then playing it for them is really exciting the very first time, and seeing if we're on the right track. And it's really exciting to be the first interpreter of a new piece.
Yeah.
Really, really exciting.
And it is presumably written for you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So those
that's
people have listened to you and they know
Yeah.
what you're looking for.
Yeah,
You've
some-
also, oh, sorry.
No, sometimes they listen to too much of our stuff and they think we can play all this really
Everything,
hard stuff,
yeah.
and they write us really
Really
hard
hard
pieces. We're still waiting for a piece of just all whole
Just-
notes.
Yeah.
John Cage silence.
Yeah.
And you've worked with text and
That was really fun. Yeah.
voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what is that like you've got all kinds of things going on stage.
That's really neat. I mean, one thing about instrumental music is that it's so abstract, right? And we feel like there's a story going on and we're totally engaged in it, but it's often the audience may not feel that same degree. And so having a text and having music serve the text or add layers to the text is super exciting. So that, I don't know, I mean, we've done quite a lot of those kind of projects, and
Yeah, it took us some time to get really
comfortable
with it, because the first couple of times we did it, it wasn't so comfortable, because we didn't know sort of how the process was going to work. And it really is just, it's like a trio, the two of us with someone speaking. But it's just like a piece of chamber music, and it took a lot of time for us to sort of find a way to be comfortable with that. But I think we've gotten pretty good at it.
Yeah.
And and it's something that's not done too often.
So it's very experimental.
Yeah.
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 You guys are huge animators in this community. And I'm thinking particularly of Takamura, but all these collaborations. First of all, why Canadian composers, and what is Takamura for people who don't know, and what have you done? What have you done?
Well, I'll do Canadian composers.
Okay.
And you do
okay.
Takamura.
I'll do Takamura.
Yeah. I mean, I think we feel really, really passionate about being part of the continuing life of classical music. I mean, we think about so many pieces that we love old music, and often there in the background there was a performer that commissioned that work or inspired that work. And so we want to play that same kind of role in terms of, you know, the legacy of piano and violin pieces. And yeah, in terms of Canadian, I mean, there's lots of wonderful Canadian composers. There's lots of other wonderful composers from other countries, but getting funding for that isn't as easy as getting funding for Canadians. So that's why Canadians, yeah.
Right.
And tell us about Tuckamore.
Well, Tuckamore is a 2-week festival that runs in August, the 2nd and 3rd week of August, and we've been doing it now. We started in 2000, so I think the first summer it ran was 2001. So this is going to be our 17th, I think.
No, 19th.
19th, yeah. Yeah, it's 19th. It's been
That's
running.
amazing.
Yeah, I know. It's yeah. Anyway, yeah, we started it, and so it has a whole bunch of different components. The first one, I think, is that we invite, you know, guest artists from all over, and they come and they perform for those 2 weeks. And we've had some really wonderful people come and some wonderful string quartets, and it's been really, really exciting. And that's been terrific. But there's also an educational component, and we audition about 22 young string players and pianists from all over. They've come from all over. And we put them into chamber groups, trios, quartets, quintets, and they come for the 2 weeks, and they get to work with us as faculty, and they work with our guest artists. And yeah, and they get to come and experience Newfoundland, which is really exciting. And that's worked out tremendously. And then the third thing that it does, we have quite a huge outreach program, all sorts of different things. We go into the schools and bring music. We have tons of free events during the course of those 2 weeks, so people can just come and listen to music. I mean, it's just a way of getting people to hear, you know, experience classical music. You know, we've just opened the doors, so you can, you know, we'll have a great string quartet come in and play in the evening, but in the afternoon you can go hear them for free. Just come and listen to a rehearsal, or they might be doing a children's concert, and you can go hear them for free. And that's a particularly exciting and rewarding part of the festival.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing that, you guys.
Just reaching out to the community that way, you know.
Let me just ask you about Goosebumps. There's a study from the University of Southern California indicating that if certain pieces of music give you goosebumps, you might have a special kind of brain with an enhanced ability to experience intense emotions, which I experienced, thankfully, while you were playing. I'm glad I have that special brain. You know,
that's interesting, because we had a piece, our last commissioned piece was about goosebumps. That's what the piece was about. It was called Frisson, which is, I guess, French for goosebumps. And he actually studied what causes goosebumps in terms of music, you know, the things that in terms of dynamics or in terms of orchestration or in terms of texture or harmony. He did a pretty intense study about what exactly might what might cause this, and then he wrote us a piece using those I guess techniques, you know, and I think he was pretty successful. It's a pretty powerful piece, but definitely I think people are much more, you know, susceptible to this than others.
I'm definitely super susceptible.
Yeah.
I mean, you asked about music in our house, and yeah, the music in our house playing is usually us playing, because I find music so overwhelming to listen to. I can't really do anything else. And this goosebump sensation, I mean, is not exclusive to classical music. I mean, I can think of millions of examples, but also, I mean, just like Barbra Streisand's voice, or Queen, or, I mean,
Queen?
no, like Bohemian Rhapsody, like certain moments in there,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God. And
Katie Lang singing Hallelujah. That's
yeah,
a good
I
one.
mean, it's, you know, and going to the movies, I'm just, any manipulative music, I'm just gone.
I think it gets worse as you get older too. Not worse.
No,
maybe
I've
it's
always
better.
been
Better. Yes,
Yes.
because you were talking about, you know, you're talking about how the music is in your fingers. You're talking about how it's in your spine, throughout your body.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's a very powerful thing that the way we experience music is corporal. It's totally visceral. It's
Yeah.
in our bodies. That's very powerful communication.
Yeah.
Way of communicating
It is.
what it
Yeah.
means to be human, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're talking about music that charges us emotionally. What about holiday music? Christmas music. We're going to get you to play something because this is our holiday show.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is the history of that Christmas music, or whatever you want to call it, holiday music? Solstice music. What is it?
Yeah.
And how far does it go back? And how does it work?
Well, I have to confess that we did it just because I guess more of it was the marketing, you know.
Do not say that on our show.
I'm sorry, but holiday music and children's music is a great way to sell CDs because you just do in terms of children's music, every 4 or 5 years you have a whole new set of kids that you're promoting to. I mean, so a CD can last a long time, is what I'm saying. And holiday music is a bit the same way, sort of.
But holiday music has such an incredibly special place inside ourselves. I mean, I have so many great memories of singing Christmas carols as a kid.
Well, that's why it's so marketable.
In our living room,
people react to it. I mean, it's nostalgic,
right,
and I mean that's why we sing the whole carols, because it's. I think as you get older, you think of Christmas, and it's something you experienced in the past with family, or there's a nostalgic element to it. And sometimes it's not incredibly happy. It can be a bit tinged with sadness.
Yeah.
So this CD of ours, Cliff Crowley did all the arrangements, and he incorporated that. Like, it's not a jolly ho 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 kind of CD.
Well,
There's
this
a
is
bit of
what I
darkness.
was going to say. I think if you wanted to do something that was just marketable, you would play it the way it's always played. But you're taking time and rearranging these things and putting your own spin on it and making it new in the best ways that you can.
Right. Yeah, so maybe we're not marketing pigs, but
no, I like artist people.
Yeah.
But that was I have to admit that was the interest in it, to see if we could do it, like see if we could actually do a Christmas CD.
Well, it was also trying to take choral music or vocal music and make it interesting as instrumental music. Like, you don't have a text changing each verse, so it required a lot of expertise on Cliff's part to think of, find really interesting ways to bring back different themes, and like the one we're going to play for you is actually a canon version, isn't it?
I think so.
Yeah.
Which means?
Which means that Tim starts the melody and then I come in with it, but at a different time. So there's a counterpoint. So in a way, you've never heard it done like that. So that's just a neat way. So he uses all different kinds of compositional techniques to
But it is
kind
dark.
of find.
Like, the harmonies are dark, and
It's not that dark.
well, maybe not that one, but some of the other ones
Yes,
are pretty
the
dark.
Bleak Midwinter is very moody and. Nancy's music is here. I don't think people can see it, but it's got marks all over it, and things are circled, and things are, I think, did you have strong arm?
Yeah.
So these are the ways in which you're making the music your own, which I'm, spying upon. Maybe we could hear that beautiful, marketable piece of music.
Ka-ching, ka-ching, yeah.
And I firmly believe that war is going on, that it's a rich and, personal, as you said, personal response to these songs.
Right.
So thank you, and let's have it.
Okay.
Thank you, guys. It occurs to me that when Jesus and Mary and Joseph showed up, they were really refugees. And this kind of work changes when we look at the position we're in the world today. And so I really want to thank you. And I do have goosebumps, and actually I cried. So I think I had a really powerful response. So thank you so much. And thanks for being here. Everyone, this is our last State of the Arts for 2018. I want to say a special thank you to Steve Lilly and Pete Stanbridge for getting us the keyboard here, over from the School of Music. We were suddenly terrified we wouldn't have a piano, and we got one because the people in the School of Music are so dedicated. Thank you to everyone here at CITL. It's so great to be able to call on this expertise. It's so great to be, having cameras and fantastic sound. And I want to say a special thank you to Janet Herron and Donna Downey and Marc Shallow and just everybody who is working on the show, which we feel so grateful for. And we'll be back in 2019 with a whole new exciting lineup of guests. And I really want to thank you for being here watching.